Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Wednesday, the 26th day of November, 2025, getaway day here in the United States of America, as everybody's on their way to Grandma's for Thanksgiving tomorrow. And so, in the words of the great Michael Conrad, let's be careful out there. Okay, let's look at the headlines. Donald Trump to send envoys to Putin, Ukraine after peace plan tweaks. In other words, this from Newsmax. The peace plan is still not there yet, even though we had all this fake news yesterday. We'll talk about that. Newsmax, another story. Trump says no firm deadline for Ukraine, Russia to reach peace deal. He remember originally the tomorrow Thanksgiving Day was the day Zelensky had to accept the peace deal, or else they would not support Ukraine anymore. Well, he took that off the table. We'll talk about what kind of progress is being made, which is actually there's none. Ukraine peace plan expected to be rejected by Russia, likely extending war until after Christmas at minimum. This is from the New York Post. Very clever headline, too. They had nothing but Nyet. Uh, in other words, Russia says no to that, as they did. And so it's still going on and on and on. We'll talk about that, of course. And then two interesting stories from the Middle East. Strains emerge in U.S. Saudi talks on Israel normalization. This is from Axios. Jerusalem posted this story. And then from Israel Hayom, a fantastic story that really fits last day's Bible prophecies. All these do. Bold plan at Israel Hayom summit, bring 1 million Jews to Israel. We'll see about that very you know, obviously interesting story and quite a project they're looking forward to doing. All right, so basically we remain at a stalemate in the talks between U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. We only did one program yesterday because I told you initially we had a dentist appointment, and so that kind of threw me from coming back and doing a second program. It's probably good I didn't because there was fake news as soon as we finished the program yesterday about Ukraine had accepted the 19-point plan. Looks like we're going to have peace. It could happen any moment now. And that was over and over again. That story got reported in the morning and in the afternoon, but then it started unraveling. Well, not necessarily they accepted. They've got a few things still. And bottom line is they didn't accept it. Okay. And so it's no peace treaty yet, no agreement. They're still discussing it. As we're going to see from the New York Post story, probably won't be till after Christmas we get anything really going here. We also have two really interesting stories, like I said, from the Middle East, Trump with MBS, and the plan to bring the Jews to the Holy Land. Bottom line is, again, we find these stories consistent with what we would expect to see happen at the time of the end before the return of Jesus Christ. See our book, 25 Signs for Near the End, for what we should expect to see. And what we do see also, that's the main thing we emphasize, not only what we should see, but what we actually do see. It's a free download from our website, Educating Our World, under the heading of Bible Prophecy. So let's look at these stories because they're very fascinating. Three stories about the peace plan that's trying to move forward between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States behind it. Trump to send envoys to Putin, Ukraine after peace plan tweaks. This is from Newsmax. President Donald Trump said Tuesday his plan to end the war in Ukraine has been quote unquote fine-tuned, and he's sending envoy Steve Witkoff to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin and Army Secretary Dan Driscoll to meet with the Ukrainian officials. He suggested he could eventually meet with Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky, but not until further progress has been made in the negotiations. He said, I will be briefed on all progress made, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and White House Chief of Staff Susan Wiles, Trump added in a social media posting. I look forward to hopefully meeting with President Zelensky and President Putin soon, but in here uppercase letters, but only when the deal to end this war is final, all uppercase letters, or in its final stages. Trump spoke to Driscoll after he held meetings late Monday and throughout Tuesday with Russian officials in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, to discuss the emerging proposal. The talks are going well and we remain optimistic. This is from Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Tolbert, spokesman for the Army Secretary, said in a statement. All right. Here's the problem. As the talks were taking place, Russia launched a wave of overnight attacks on Ukraine's capital, Kiev, with at least 7 people killed in strikes that hit city buildings and energy infrastructure. A Ukrainian attack on southern Russia killed 3 people and damaged homes, authorities said. Still, Trump expressed a measure of optimism that his administration's diplomatic efforts could soon lead to a breakthrough. In other words, no breakthrough, same old, same old. We just keep looking at the same thing every day. The stalemate goes on and on and on. Now, headline number two, at least this got taken care of. Trump says no firm details, no firm deadline for Ukraine, Russia to reach a peace deal. It's also from Newsmax. President Trump said on Tuesday he backed away from a Thursday deadline for Ukraine to agree on a U.S.-backed peace plan, saying the deadline for me is when it's over. So he's changed his mind on that backpedal. Trump, speaking to reporters on Air Force One as he flew to Florida for the Thanksgiving holiday, said U.S. negotiators were making progress in discussions with Russia and Ukraine, and Moscow had agreed to some concessions, but he did not detail them. U.S.-based framework for ending the war, first reported last week, prompted fresh concerns what the Trump administration might be willing to push Ukraine to sign a peace deal heavily tilted towards Moscow. And that was the initial worry. And Trump said this is just a general plan. And they've tweaked it since then to 19 points. Ukraine supposedly agreed with a lot of it, not all of it. But Russia said, as we see in the next story, no. At least he's backed off the threat to Ukraine. That's the headline here. Okay, headline number three. It's in the New York Post. Nothing but Nyet. I love it. Ukraine peace plan expected to be rejected by Russia, which it was, likely extending the war until after Christmas at a minimum. Russia is set to reject the new 19-point ceasefire deal drafted by the U.S. and Ukraine, but may use disinformation tactics to keep President Trump engaged in continued talks, suggesting the war will last at least through Christmas, sources told the New York Post Tuesday. The White House said it's working to secure a deal with after special presidential envoy Steve Witkoff developed a previous controversial 28-point version of the plan that heavily favored Moscow. That plan included input from Kiev. The Trump administration has insisted. The proposal, which we have documented here, was roundly criticized by both sides of the U.S. political aisle and the international community. In other words, Russia seemed to be the only country that liked it. And even them, they said, well, that's not exactly what we want. Because it was very one-sided. So they narrowed it down to a 19-point plan that was supposedly acceptable to Ukraine after talks between top Washington and Kiev officials happened on Sunday. Okay, so bottom line is, all in all, this complicated war continues to drone on, pardon the pun there, until this war is over. Russia is not able to set its sights on Israel in the predicted last days invasion. Now, this is the important takeaway from us here. So we always have new people watching, and we need to understand that, remember, Russia, Rosh in Ezekiel 38, leads this coalition, a last days coalition against Israel. Iran is not the main country behind this attack on Israel, merely a surrogate. Israel will feel secure at that particular time in the future, not expecting an attack. The United States is nowhere to be seen in the Middle East at the time of the end, conspicuous by their absence, because as we always emphasize, this leader Gog, his title of Russia, doesn't give a second thought to invading Israel with his coalition of nations. In other words, he's not worried about any nation coming to the aid of Israel. Nobody does. No nation does, but the God of the Bible does, as we see. And then Libya and Sudan must have armies so they can join the invading force. They're listed there in Ezekiel 38, 39. So none of these five things are true right now. Five things are not true. Russia is not ready to put an army together to invade Israel. Iran is still the top dog militarily in the Middle East, and that's got to change. They have to become a surrogate there of Russia at the time. Israel has to feel secure, like they're not worried about an attack, and that's certainly not the case right now. The United States is not a player, and we're a big player right now in the Middle East, so that's not the case. And then Libya and Sudan, two nations that are going to have armies that join this coalition, according to Ezekiel 38, 39. That's not even possible. Libya is divided with the civil war, and Sudan is certainly not a position to put an army together yet. So the point is, our book 25 Signs, we're near the end. Signs 9 through 11 explains this, as does our book, the Ezekiel 38, 39 Invasion. Again, free downloads from our website, Educating Our World. Please do not listen to anybody that tells you Ezekiel 38 is right around the corner. It is not. I'm sorry. If you take the Bible as your guide, this is our textbook. There are five things that have to be in place for that to happen, and none of the five are in place. Now they're moving towards that, and eventually they'll be in place. But don't listen to anybody that says it's going to happen instantaneously or immediately. Well, the Lord's return could happen, the rapture of the church at any time, but this Ezekiel 38, 39 invasion is certainly not right around the corner. All right, now two interesting stories from the Middle East here. Strange strains emerge in the U.S.-Saudi talks on Israel normalization. This is from Axios, which the Jerusalem Post reported. In public, Trump and bin Salman flattered one another. However, part of their closed-door discussions were reportedly tense. This is fascinating, actually. Not surprising, though. U.S. President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince MBS Mohammed bin Salman held a civil but difficult meeting at the White House last week in which talks grew tense over Saudi-Israeli normalization, Axios reported on Tuesday, citing U.S. officials. In public, Trump and bin Salman flattered one another. However, part of their closed-door discussions were tense, according to Axios. Trump was disappointed to hear the pushback from the Saudi crown prince, the report stated, citing officials that were there. During a public meeting at the White House with bin Salman, Trump said he received a positive response from the Saudi crown prince on Saudi-Israeli normalization during their conversation. But bin Salman said, though, he wants his country to be part of the Abraham Accords, but he also makes sure there's a secure path to quote unquote a two-state solution, a Palestinian state, which of course for Israel is a non-starter. Now, in private, when Trump pushed for the Muslim nation to join the Abraham Accords, bin Salman pushed back, arguing that Saudi public opinion is overwhelmingly anti-Israel following the Israel-Hamas war. That's sort of disingenuous. The public was overwhelmingly anti-Israel before the Israel-Hamas war. He claimed that Saudi Arabian society is not ready for normalization, Axios said, citing three sources. The best way to say it is disappointment and irritation. The president really wants them to join the Abraham Accords. He tried very hard to talk to him. It was an honest discussion, but MBS is a strong man. He certainly is. He stood his ground. Axios quoted one person as saying. Again, what these leaders realize, you've got Mohammed bin Salman, he's going to be taking over, in Saudi Arabia. He'll be there. He's a young man for a long time. We still got Putin there in Russia running the show, Xi in China, the Ayatollah is still there in Iran, but they'll have a substitute for him someday when he goes away of all the earth. Little rocket man in North Korea. These people are perpetually there. Putin in Russia, of course. But the President of the United States, he's only have two terms. He's only got 3 years left, and they know there's going to be somebody after him. And so a lot of countries like Hamas, and organizations, terrorists, are trying to run out the clock, as it were. All right. Anyway, the White House told Axios it's essential for Trump that all Middle Eastern countries join the Abraham Accords since the war in Gaza has ended and Iran's nuclear program has been set back. Well, the Gaza war has not ended. It's just a ceasefire now to a degree, but something's got to happen in the not so distant future. Now, again, like we said, it could be where it does end in the sense that there's two states there. There's the Hamas state has about 50% of Gaza, and Israel takes over the other half. We don't know. That's one of the possibilities. Anyway, the Saudis come into play with other Gulf states as those who protest the invasion. This is sign 10 of our 25 signs. We're near the end. They do not participate in the Ezekiel 38-39 invasion, but they do object. They speak out against it. What are you doing? You're trying to take a spoil here from Israel, and that's what they tell these nations led by Russia that are attacking. So they don't help out Israel militarily. Now, right now, they couldn't. There's a possibility if they get these F-35 someday, they could. But we know from Scripture they don't. They stand on the sidelines and protest. And so they're a player. They're mentioned specifically in Scripture, the Gulf states, ancient Sheba and Dedan. So that's where they're at. Now, finally, headline number 5. This is interesting from Israel Hayom. A bold plan at Israel Hayom summit to bring 1 million Jews to Israel. Now, there's a story, I think it was the day before yesterday, that something like 25% of the Jews, 25% of the Israelis are thinking about leaving the country because of all the problems. But the problem is, where are they going to go? Because it's bad as it is in Israel, it's worse everywhere else in the world. It really is just getting further problematic. Okay, here's the story. This comprehensive vision aims to bring 1 million Jews from around the world to Israel within a decade, strengthening the economy, demographics, and diaspora connections through strategic immigration planning. The Israel Hayom Summit, scheduled for the next week in New York, will spotlight one of the most significant and ambitious initiatives discussed in Israel in recent years, called the 11th Million. This wide-ranging vision seeks to advance a national goal in the coming years to bring 1 million Jews from around the world to Israel within a decade, part of a strategic effort to strengthen the economy, the demographics, and connection with the diaspora. The discussion will be led by three of the most influential voices in the Jewish and business world: World Jewish Congress President Ronald S. Lauder, philanthropist and entrepreneur Sylvan Adams, and senior tech investor Michael Eisenberg. They will be joined by leaders of the Jewish community in New York, the city where most of the global Jewish discourse is currently taking shape. The combination of voices with influence from the business, diplomatic, and community worlds is expected to make discussions with them highly significant. Now, the initiative comes at a time when Israel faces a growing need to strengthen human capital, and that's the truth, alongside a desire to renew trust and connection with the world Jewry. According to the vision's architects, millions of Jewish people currently live in centers where Jewish identity faces challenges, partly due to rising anti-Semitism and political shifts in New York. Israel seeks to become a destination offering security, community stability, and exceptional professional opportunities. Now, this is consistent with sign 4 of our 25 signs. We're near the end. This is a sign many people often miss. Even some of these prophecy specialists, people teach on this subject. And that is this: the nation of Israel will return in 2 stages. Many make the mistake of seeing the return of the people to their ancient homeland as fulfilling a number of last days prophecies. However, there are 2 returns the Bible speaks of. The first is what's already happened since 48. They've come back in unbelief, and that's the first return. The second will be when the Lord himself gathers the people from all nations, and this only occurs after the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so when you see all these stories, well, they're returning to their homeland. This is fulfilling, on eagle's wings. God's bringing them back. No, they're coming back in unbelief of Jesus. They still have the 70th week of Daniel, the great tribulation facing them in the future. This is not God doing that. He's allowing them to come back on their own, but they're still in unbelief of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, what do these stories teach us? Again, to go to Scripture first and foremost and understand exactly what it says will take place in the last days, then work from there. This is our goal here every day. We start with the scripture. We document everything on our website, Educating Our World. It's all free, 12 books on Bible prophecy, so you can look them up, download, whatever. But sadly, as we mentioned, there's way too much misinformation about the time of the end circulating among prophecy specialists. Now, we're not challenging their motivation, only challenging many of their non-biblical statements and conclusions. And a lot of people are led astray because you hear it's going to happen by the end of this year, or soon, within the next couple of months, and they give a date. I've sat on stage with people who gave dates when this has all got to happen by, can't even tell you, 2011, 2015, 2019, 2021. And people have actually said that. And, when I'm sitting there on stage and the folks are asking questions, when's all this going to end? My answer always is we don't know. We don't know how soon it's going to be. It's all in God's timing. And so we have to leave it up to him. But in the meantime, we have a job to do, to preach the gospel and be salt and light in this world. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Be careful out there. Your travel today to grandma's house or wherever you go for Thanksgiving. I'm planning on doing a second edition of Breaking News today. There's a couple of stories that I'd like to add. And one of the things we want to talk about too, since Black Friday's coming up, got to be really careful of the scams that are out there. There's a huge story, a couple of them that are, hitting the wires about watch out for all these emails you're going to get from these companies that claim to be Amazon, claim to be this, claim to be that are not. And they've set up fake websites. So be real careful because sadly, this is the time when these sort of things happen. All right, till next time, I'm Don Stewart. Thank you so much for watching. Until we talk to you later today, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.